think so. My greetings to everyone. With this greeting, we are going to start this gathering, and we will start with the setting a positive, a constructive intention, not only to join this gathering, but also, how to live Saturday, and also, wider, how to live our lives. It is, as I shared with you last few days, it is very, very helpful to live our lives with a positive and a constructive mental states, attitudes, regardless of the external challenges, predicaments. Try to learn our everyday lives, at least mentally, with the positive thoughts, positive intentions. And that is here we are gradually training our mind to have that kind of starting the day, the event. And the positive thoughts, intentions, according to the individual's mental strengths, mental dispositions, not simply mimicking or not just simply somebody has said, but from our own convictions, that conviction on that is helpful to start the day, an event with positive thoughts. That can be a very simple in the sense, not very much deep philosophical backing or understanding or religious, spiritual encouragement. Simply, adapting, feeling, thinking, I will live today, this Saturday, with at least intentionally, with knowingly not to cause harm to others' bodies, others' minds, others' environments, and so forth. And then if we expand this positive thoughts, not only intentionally not going to cause harm to others, but also if opportunity arises to support others. Others can be anybody, our close family members, friends, or can be completely stranger who need help and support. And that kind of help and support can be very small things. And try to engage in that without intentionally self-interest. And during the day, briefly revisit to those positive, constructive motivations that we set in the morning. Then people who have spiritual path to follow, start your day, set your motivation according to that spiritual path, its teachings. Like people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, then it is useful, helpful to start the day, to start the event with the mind taking refuge in three jewels. The Buddha as a one's teacher, mentor, the Dharma, the teachings that he had given, as a means and methods to apply in our daily lives, to enhance, to further cultivate ethics, concentration, and the wisdom, which are the actual refuge. Once we live our life with these three mental qualities, ethics, concentration, and the wisdom, these will help us to protect from the many, particularly many internal challenges, predicaments, and difficulties. And through that, some of those external adversities, difficulties may not perceive very unbearable, very painful. And when we enhance further these technically called three trainings, ethics, concentration, and the wisdoms, eventually we'll experience the complete cessation, complete extinction of dukkha and origins of dukkha. When that cessation extinction is experienced, then genuine, long-lasting joy, happiness, and fulfillment is experienced. And that is the final refuge. Then people who follow within the teachings of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva and the teachings, to those people, then cultivation of the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta, the mind which genuinely, sincerely cares, concerns well-beings of all living beings, not just oneself, not just one's own loved ones, not just one's own friends, not just some selectives, but all living beings. That might be a very daunting, very challenging task, but if we train our mind, if we give proper training to our minds, thoughts, and emotions, they will learn. So starting the day, starting an event, in this case, gathering here, physically being here, sitting, saying a few prayers, listening to the talk, contemplation, reflections, and the discussions. That we engage in, it is helpful to engage with the positive and constructive motivation. With that, people who like to join with me to say the refuge and the bodhicitta lines, do so. Sanje chena tsodi chona la chanjo parto dani gyatso che dagi jinso jibe tsona ge dola penje sanje tupa sho. Sanje cheda tsoti chana chanjo parto dagi gyatso che dagi jinso jibe dola penje dopa sho. Sanje cheda tsoti chanjo pardo dami gyatso che dagi jenso gibe tsonam ge dola penje sanje topara. as we started our this course, the first, the Monday morning, when we started the course, I started this discussion or this course saying it is useful and helpful ourselves be fully aware of that our current existence is combination of this corporal, physical, and the mental states. Mental states, not just the physical, and also not just the mental states. Combination of existence is combination of these two. And really, constantly to reminding ourselves that is the case. In that case, we don't need to rationalize, we don't need to prove by the logic, that we can tell from our own experiences. Our existence is combination of, union of these two, physical body and the mind. It is equally very obvious for us, to keep these two, with less trouble or less difficulties, particularly, the physical level. We all know it needs constant our attention. Not only just to feed delicious foods, drinks, or yesterday I mentioned, lots of food supplements, but it also needs to keep it working, and particularly when your age is, over 60 these days, because I'm, over 65, in fact, 67. So some of those friends who knows, who know the physical, they keep saying, "Oh, Tashi, you need to do exercise. Otherwise, your muscles are going to get lost its strength," and so forth. So like that, it needs lots of our attention. And many of us do that, but it is equally, if the physical body to keep healthy, to keep strong, to keep, more active, in order to keep it healthy and less problem, and it is equally, the case. We need to pay our attention to our mental state. And this might be what I'm saying now, it might be third or fourth times during this course time of setting. And I feel that is important for us not to neglect the hard part of our existence. Now, the taking care of the mental, world of our existence, then, on the one hand, raising in our mental state or in our mental continuum, raising lots of positive, constructive thoughts, emotions. On the other hand, the reducing, minimizing some of those unhealthy, disturbing, thoughts and emotions. And that is how we keep our mental world healthy and sound. It is now quite, the well established, with the evidence saying people who have, mentally have lots of worry, fear, and that part of that kind of sort of pleasant mental state, they, even that affects to their physical health, like a high blood pressure, heart problems, and so on and so forth. And that is quite clearly stated or, found. So therefore, let alone next life, let alone complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering, right here and now, in my case, maybe next 10, 15 years, to keep my life at least in a more active and more constructive. It is not just to keep this body, healthy or give the exercise. It is also this mind to have those, training. So that is very, very useful. And it is also a little bit to extend. It is not just, keep the positive thoughts, emotions to reduce the, negative or constructive, those mental states. It is also trying to extend, our the what you call the thinking, not just thinking me, myself, or my close family. Try to extend a little bit further than me, I, mine. To have a, mental exercise, to have a mental training, able to think a little bit further than I and the me and the mine. When we are too close, just like this, I and the me and the mine alone, even the small challenges, difficulties may appear unbearable, very difficult to what you call to bear for one's own benefit, for one's own sake. But also, if we extend our thoughts, our thinking minds, our emotions, to further them, it's not just me and mine and our, but a little bit there, others. Then the mind will, learn to do that. So now here, there is a nice, beautiful verse written by one of the Tibetan teachers. And I found it is very, very nice to reflect on, from time to time. And this is a great, practitioner, a great learned, I think around 15th or 16th century master, or a little bit earlier. There's a verse, this, first I will say in Tibetan, Dongye Tamasamyo Medeji, Delamyo, Shokshe Mabani, Dada Shinga, Kyavari Yumeshi, Shende Kawa Kyavari, Shingilo. So the first line, Dongye Tamasamyo Medeji. So saying, nobody, including myself. So first, if I start from myself, even a slightest, even a small, difficulties that I don't like to experience. Tamasami meditation, Dungel means dukkha or suffering. Tamo refers to tiny, small, relatively insignificant. Dungel tamo, zamyam, just that small pain or difficulties. Zamyam, meditation. Don't like to have, don't want to experience. Dungel tamo zamyam, meditation. And that is if we just pause, the meaning of the first line, reflect upon very honestly, very sincerely, if we apply that meaning of that first line upon myself, that is true. For me, even a small, say that in the evening, in my bedroom, if I hear a mosquito noise, just that, see, even that noise is unbearable. Hasn't bite yet. But even just hearing noise of mosquito is unbearable. And that is, the real and fact when that situation applies upon me when I face. And there are many other things. Dunga tamasame meditation. Devan, Chokshe and Mevani, that second line. There are joy, fulfillment, happiness. There are namyam, never, Chokshe never. There's no, satisfaction. There's no sense of, there's no satisfaction how much that we have. Even have a, sort of long period of time, still we want more. If I apply that meaning of that line to myself, it is true. Whatever things that gives me sense of joy, sense of pleasure, sense of happiness, there's no deep sense of, okay, I'm happy, that's enough. One more. What's the next? How's the next? When it's going to come? And that kind of, Chokshe, this word, this very, very important word, Chokshe, which we are going to talk today, sets of mental states. This is one of them. Contentment. There's no contentment, no matter how joy or how happiness that we experience. Then this comes the third line. In that level, in that situation or the level in the sense, the meaning of these first two lines. The third line is Dao Dang Shen La Kebar Yue Min Xin. Dao means self, oneself. Shen means other. Dao Dang Shen La Kebar. Kebar means difference. Yue means there's no difference. With regard to that, these previous two situations. So that is here really, what I just mentioned earlier, slowly to release or reduce this very, very tight in a very close, very narrow states of mind, thinking, I, me, to reduce a little bit that, that barrier. So meaning of this verse, reflecting on these 3 lines, the third line, image. There's no difference whatsoever between, with regard to those previous meaning of the previous 2 lines, myself and others. I myself, do not like even tiny bits of pain or difficulties, such as hearing the mosquitoes' noise. No, neither the others. That other can be our close family members, or that can be stranger on the street. No difference. And coming to the second line, I never feel content when I have a sort of joy, happiness, fulfillment. I would like to have more in terms of the quantity, in terms of the time, longer, higher. So do the others. So do others. Again, in that case, the others here include our close family members, as well as, the strangers on the street. Image. Then the last line, it's saying, bless my mind, blessed me, or blessed my mental continuum, to see, or to feel, or to think, make others be happy. Shen here again, others, they means, happy, joy, fulfillment. Gawa, that's also joy. Gawa, Shen, they Gawa. To make them, to make others, may bless my mind, may bless me, that to create, to support, to work, to have a joy, happiness. That is very, very nice verse. So you have this Tibetan term, Chingi Lo. So, slightly different. Anyway, Chingi Lo. It has a meaning. Sometimes people translate, the term, and it is culturally, that is how it is, how it is believed. That means bless me, bless my mental continuum. That's normally how it is translated. So when you go to see those, great teachers, and traditionally you seek their blessings, and in Tibetan it's called Chinlap. Chinlap Shova, that means seeking blessing. The actual meaning of these 2 syllables, Chinlap, it has a strong connotation of transformation. If you go to see a spiritual teacher, spiritual, these spiritual teachers, when you seek blessings, what you should be seeking in here, say, I go to seek blessings, such as such great teachers, what you should be seeking? You should be seeking, transformation. Transformation. That's the actual meaning of blessing. So there are these beautiful stories, and I thought some are very, very nice stories in this context. For example, there are three statues on the left side of the Buddha. The center one is Tsongkhapa, and on his right and left, two main disciples of Tsongkhapa. This is just very funny hands like this. Anyway, those next to the Buddha on this side, Buddha's this side. There are three statues. One center one is a little bit what you call higher than the other two disciples. These two disciples, they are in the same generations, so these two disciples, main disciples of this great teacher, Tsongkhapa, they came from those days. The tradition is called Sadhya tradition, from slightly different great teachers, disciples. And then later the main teacher, Tsongkhapa, he was very well known in central Tibet, and these two his disciples, they are a little bit on the western side of the Tibet, and they heard Tsongkhapa's those great qualities and fame and so forth. They came to see, not together in a different occasion, they came to see him, to meet him. Age-wise, a little bit older one out of those two disciples, age-wise, a little bit older one, from the two disciples, called Geshe. And so he has a sort of strong, this very strong, the attitude, thinking, I'm not sure how good in terms of the realization, in terms of the understanding of the Tsongkhapa. Anyway, but there are lots of good, things people are saying. I want to go and see him. I want to test his knowledge and his understanding. So he went to see Tsongkhapa, and when he comes, Tsongkhapa was giving a talk, giving this like this kind of classes, and he Geshe said, somewhat at the corner, and then the Tsongkhapa was giving teachings. Particularly, he was giving teachings on the cultivation of altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta, and just sitting in one session, Geshe's attitude, mind, that want to test Tsongkhapa's knowledge was completely changed. He was fully moved, completely moved how Tsongkhapa's, manner of giving teachings and the teaching itself. Though Geshe himself was very well trained, were great scholars. But just for one sitting, one session, his attitude is completely changed. And then after the session is finished, Geshe came to see Tsongkhapa, and he requested to become Tsongkhapa's disciples. So that is one nice story. So transformation, seeking blessing. Seeking blessing is more like a transforming. So in this case, Geshe is that kind of little bit popped up, a little bit that, if I use the arrogant, I'll a little bit difficult to use arrogant, say that kind of, I want to test his knowledge, that immediately transformed into wanting to learn, wanting to be with this teacher, and for then later become this Geshe later become Tsongkhapa's the first what you call the throne holder in the sense when Tsongkhapa passed away, Geshe become the head of that tradition, the first. So like that, there's another nice story with the other disciple, which I will not go. But that is here. This last line out of 4 lines end with this Tibetan 2 syllables, Qin Yi Lao, Qin Lao. To say that transform our mind. So transform in the sense up to now, my attitude, my thinking, my concern, my worry, mainly related to me, I, self, mind, very close. But that attitude, that kind of mindset to transform, to change, to turn into thinking, concerning, working for others, thinking for others, more thinking for well-beings of other living beings, more concerns of well-beings of other living beings. And that is what here, transformation. And that is what here, all the major world major religious traditions have so-called prayer. For example, every evening end of our gathering, we say 21 Tara prayers. But I think it might be the same in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions or Buddhist traditions. Many of these recitations, many of these prayers are more like a meditation manual rather than simply chanting. Meditation manual. The verse that I quote, a few minutes ago, that verse is a part of, the verse, maybe, I can't remember exactly how many verses, maybe 25 or 30 verses from a text, from a text to do the meditation stage by stage, from the first point to the last point. And this one is one of those verses. But we chant in a sometimes very, very nice tune. And that gives us the opportunity to reflect on the meaning. So the point, what I'm making here is this. To really to have a the mental strength. To have a mental strength, this mental strength, to try to think beyond me, I, self, mind. It needs strength. It needs courage. But it is very, very helpful to train our mind in that way. Yesterday's our afternoon, the discussion mainly on loving kindness and great compassion. Along this, this morning in my general talk, saying, train our mind to think a little bit further than the I. These are in the same train or same line. Same line. We may feel that means, as I briefly touched yesterday, that means, neglecting or, not taking care of my own needs, not taking care of self-needs, my needs. When we say think for well-being of others. Because I, me, and others are the two different phenomena, two different things. When we say think, extend, our thinking, working, concern further than I, it seems okay, that means don't think about myself. But in reality, although I'm not that experienced, but those great experienced teachers who train in this fashion, they have said again and again, once we really, change our attitude, our old attitude, old thinking, just me and me and me. But if you gradually, with the skill, if you transform to think for others, many of these great trained masters have said, there's a tremendous sense of, tremendous sense of, or deep sense of self-security. It's completely opposite of what we are concerned about. And also one of my teachers used to say this, and this is very vivid, the examples. When the farmers, at the springtime, when they saw the barley or wheat or rice seeds on fields, the main, the aim or the goal is to have a good harvest of barley or rice or wheat or, the grain, whatever grain it is. But if they get at the harvest, if they get good, whatever grain they have planted, they also get a very, very good stores, the grass. It is byproduct. Having good, you say store, what you call that, grass, stores for their animals, for other usage. Though at the springtime when they sow the seeds, they're hoping to have a good harvest, whatever grain they have sown. But at the harvest time, if they get a good, grain, whatever they sow, they will have good stores. It is byproduct. And one of my teachers used to give that analogies. If we work for the well-beings of others, well-beings of oneself will take care by itself. It is a byproduct. So very, very, the interesting, if I put it in that way, very, very useful to think about. If our old, means and methods to fulfill our goals and happiness, if those means and methods, particularly those key points, if they are not working, it is not wise. Keep using the old things again and again. Still, though it's not working, we keep banging, make to use them to work. And that is not very wise. Need to have a new strategy, new means and methods. And that is here, because the key factor, the starter point, like a car or those engine, those machines, the ignition key, like the ignition key is the sense of I, self, me. That's the ignition key. All the other pedals like brake, gas pedal, a clutch, all those are the supported. When the ignition key, I or the self is turned, then all this need to, press to move the car or whatever we are driving. So here, for us, it is useful to think about, to at least to probe, to experiment, which ignition key works better. The ignition key, this I, self, or the ignition key, others. Which one works better? So that is my today's general sort of, the blah, blah. So I prepared that because today we are going to look at a little bit some of those particular mental states, which we did yesterday afternoon, a little bit on the love and compassion. And today we are going to look at some particular mental states. And to do that, then I thought it is good to start with this talk. So you have heard many times during these last, 6 days, the term that saying distorted, mistaken, unhealthy, the destructive thoughts, distorted thoughts, emotions, unhealthy thoughts and emotions. You have heard many times. So this session, I'm going to bring the term, which the ancient Indian masters, Buddhist Indian masters, and also I think the non-ancient Indian spiritual masters have used, and which is also continue to use the term. In Tibetan, it is called Nyun Mong. And quite often it is translated into English saying affliction, delusion. Those are the technical terms that use. Affliction, delusion. Now, day before yesterday, the term that I use saying, the distortion, what you call the mistaken, the destructive, negative. These are also the terms used, but in the classical ancient Indian Buddhist masters term, and also followed by those Tibetans, the term is, I think in Sanskrit, it's Kalish, something like that. Klesha. Yeah. So in Tibetan, Nyun Mong. So we are going to look at that little bit first. Nyun Mong. In Tibetan, that term, Nyun Mong, which is the translation for that Klesha in Sanskrit, it has a connotation of that our mind become, the more, more budget, like become low, make low, So whether particular mental states, whatever, later I'm going to throw you several terms, which you are going to study a little bit, regardless of these different terms, but for individuals to know whether one's own mental state or mental term, a mental continuum is, polluted or is, influenced by the particular, in this case, by the Nyun Mong, or not from, by the, in the Sanskrit terms, klesha, you say? Yeah. Or not, we can tell from our own experiences at certain extents. Just understanding the connotation of this term in Tibetan, Nyun Mong. That means certain mental states when they occur, when they arise within us, that our general states of minds become a little bit low, down. Yeah, that's the one term. Another meaning is when particular mental state, a mental state occurs or arises, that our general states of mind, and including the individual, become agitated, irritated, less peaceful, then that is the sign of Nyunmon, affliction. Delusion is arising. I'm not saying any particular. At this stage, I'm dealing with just the general. How can I define? How can I understand certain mental states are delusion, affliction, in Tibetan, Nyunmon? Not giving any particular name. Sometimes giving names are not very helpful, but to tell from our own experiences. And these great teachers, have said again and again, those mental states, when they occur, when they arise, for whatever the reason, whatever the causes and conditions, when they occur, when they arise, that make our general state of mind down, little bit unsettled, and if we go a little bit further, irritated, that is the sign of affliction. Affliction, a particular affliction is taking place in our mental continuum. So think about, that now then, in the Buddhist classical texts, like the Abhidhamma texts, these great masters have identified certain mental states, the emotions as well as thoughts. Certain mental states, they label as root afflictions. Root, when we have a plant, root afflictions. Certain mental states can be emotion, can be thoughts. They use the term root afflictions. Why they use the term root in Tibetan, zawa, zanyun, root afflictions. Why they use root? From their observation and analysis, certain days, afflictions occur. Due to their occurrence, many other afflictions, follows. Like the, plants, trees, when the seed is sown, and when the plant's roots are slowly extended, then trunk, then branches, leaves, fruits, flowers, they all follow. Sawa. Similar to that, in our mental continuum, certain afflictions occur. Due to their occurrence, other afflictions follow. Therefore, they are called root afflictions. And they identify 6. Hopefully not more than 6, but they identify 6. But it can be shorter, or it can be a little bit longer, but they identify 6. It's called 6 root afflictions. So why they are called root, that is important. That is important. And we, here, what is helpful? What is helpful is really, to observe, to observe on our mental continuum. Particularly when certain, afflictions start to occur, to reflect on that. How, when that occurs, how that occurrence makes you individual. And then individuals, whatever feeling is very much related to the mind, mental state. So in these cases, then this, which we earlier that we, the other day we used this term, mindfulness and the introspections are very, very helpful. Introspection, are very, very helpful to understand what is going on in our mental continuum. When particular, affliction, due to the occurrence of one particular affliction, what follows after that? Not just physically, not just, verbally, but also mentally. So out of 6, we are going to look at few, not all. That we don't have that much time to look at all. But if we get it, the general sort of, the understanding of some of these afflictions, then you can apply the same to the others. We can identify. So the very overused in terms of the time, the term, or you have heard many times, the first one is aversion. That in a deep sense of dislike. Deep sense of dislike, aversion. In Tibetan, Shedang. Shedang has a very, what you call the frightening connotation. I usually use that term, frightening connotation. She means depth. From the depth of what earlier, other day I used the term gut. From the gut, from in here, she has depth of our heart, our mind. Depth of my mind. She, dang, means want to do something, bad things to others. That is dang, dangwa. Dangwa means want to hurt. So that feeling of from the gut wanting to hurt, she, dang, in English translated, what you call aversion or hatred can be used. That is one of the 6 root afflictions. We may think, I don't hold that kind of, ugly mental states. Because we all love to have good ones. We all want but not to have good ones. And when I use them, there is this one of the root afflictions called shedang in Tibetan. And it has a connotation of, wanting to hurt from my gut to others. Oh, I never heard all that kind of to anybody. You are wrong. Sorry. According to the Buddhist analysis, these great teachers' analysis, even if we don't have that in a very conscious level, at the subconscious, or at least in a potential level, is there. These days, unfortunately, there are many examples, but my early time in the UK, it was a sad part, or global sad part was, Yugoslavia in that area, that, war. And those days I used to watch quite lots of news, mainly to, of course it is quite, mainly to, my surface intention is to learn the language. Do you remember that I heard now that is closed down, that Australian soap opera, Neighbours. Neighbours, they say Australian soap opera. Now it's closed down. Yeah. I like that watching. I watch a lot. Because, when I was studying English, that was 1992, I went to East Anglia, Norwich, beautiful small city. So the language school was very, very good, run by a company called Bell Language School, very well known, very well, so I was, they were very kind. They gave me initially 3 months scholarship, then eventually they gave me 6 months. So during the lunch break is quite long. School was from 8 to 3:30. So, but lunch break was quite long. And me and a few, mainly men from, Arab countries, we are the, age about 40, 30 or 40. The majority are very young. Those days, even there were many Japanese too, because, Japanese economy has not fully gone down, just slowly gone down, but it's not gone down. So the companies, they send the young future, they, employ to send it. Otherwise, it's very, very expensive. So food was good, everything was good, but the lunch break was a little bit long for me. And, each classroom have a nice television, even though it's 1992 or 3, big, nice televisions, big, good. So that is one of my programs that I watch. Neighbors. Anyway, so what I'm saying that, yeah. So some of these sad stories in what's happening in Yugoslavia, and those days called Yugoslavia, now it's different. Particular this town called Sarajevo, and when we listen, and when the camera people, they go to interview, and for generations, some small towns or some small villages, Muslim and Christians live side by side as neighbors. they support each other, they celebrate each other, so whatever those things. But when this war broken down, they start killing each other. So that is what I'm saying here. Potential is there. So the manifested or the obvious sign is our losing temper for small things. That's the sign. The seed is there, or potential is there to experience hatred. Shedan. So that is one of the afflictions, root afflictions, that we, should try to deal with that. Initially, some of those, obvious, manifested level. Then gradually going down to the root level. When this affliction, mimong, shedan, hatred, start, one of the main causes to arise is to see, or at least to perceive, to think, others or mainly living beings, they are not right. They are not good. That is the starting point. Or they're saying, although they are good to me, they are not good to my possessions, my relatives, my family members, and sometimes even great-great-great-great-fathers. I don't like these people. They treated my great-great. So that is one of the main sources. There's a deep sense of thinking. They treat us or they did us something very unjustifiable. Seeing the other's action, something very harmful, very damaging to ourselves or to our loved ones. And that is the feeling, like a fuel to boil the hatred. So therefore, it is good to that yesterday that we are talking about having as much as we can, having a valid mind, to see, to understand as much as we can as there are, not exaggerate, not denial. Exaggeration and denial are the two sides of the two sides. That very often, when these root afflictions, when the afflictions occur, mainly either the exaggeration of the qualities, of the values, of the functions, of the necessities, or denying. So, important to think about that. Hatred, the shedan. Then another point, another mental state here, root affliction, is attachment. Attachment. In Tibetan, the chak. Attachment. the previous mental state and this one, attachment, when they occur within our mental continuum, they occur in a very, very different ways. Very, very different ways. When hatred or anger arises, it is relatively easy to identify, to recognize. When attachment arises, occurs, not easy to understand. At least, maybe very, very close, but that's not really that much damaging. But this, what in Tibetan, some of the Tibetan teachers use the analogies, to how attachment, how the manner of arising attachment is. The Tibetan analogy, those Tibetan masters' analogy is, if we drop, on a drop of oil on a page, on a paper, just then you will see the entire what's called the oil sips through the paper very gently. Very gently. So for individuals, when this root affliction, attachment occurs, arises, we will not not easy to understand its arising. And also it arises in certain extents, both are saying, it arises, attachment arises, like our protection, like supporting us, giving us what we need, like feeding to a child. Small children, sometimes they don't understand their belly is full. Even though their belly is full, they still want more. Attachment has that kind of, when it arises something feeding us what we need. Whether we need or not, that's a different. That's a different part, totally different. But when it arises really, feeding us what we need. And also, in terms of the where they focus, or when where they focus, or one of the main causes to arise. Attachment arises, seeing the object or seeing the event, something attractive. Unlike the hatred. Hatred arises, the object opposite of attractive. Ugly. Ugly, not necessarily, the physical ugly, but the ugly in the sense. In the both cases, on the one hand, attachment arises, seeing the object attractive, and hatred arises on the object, the ugly, there's a high degrees of exaggeration. High degrees of exaggeration on the attachment when it arises on the object, something attractive. I'm using just the term attractive, not necessarily attractive, only physical. From the value side, from the usefulness side, or for many reasons. And same as hatred. I can't remember now, but clearly everything, those times when I was watching some of those, and when after the war was a little bit, what you call the reduced, and when they want to go to these different places, displays, these families and communities, and they do interview. Why, did these things? There's clearly, dislike because of how they treated in our, hands or what happened, this and that. But obviously, there's a huge exaggeration too. And it not necessarily exaggeration is his or her own side, but other people have told you, oh, they did this, they did it us like this, they treated us like this, and you believe it. So here the point what I'm making is, out of those 6 afflictions, among many afflictions, which these Buddhist teachers have counted 6 root afflictions. Out of those 6 root afflictions, so far we discussed these 2, hatred and attachment. Although, out of our luck, we may not hold hatred very actively. Out of our luck, we may not have strong attachment. But propensity is there. Seed is there. Seed is there. So think about that. They're very, very useful to reflect on, to observe, to pay attention. In that way, I think it is true. The healing will start when we see that something is not right. Until that stage, healing will not start. Even in the gross levels, some of the modern Western, therapies, treating people who have mental difficulties and so forth. Starting point of the healing, they said, is when the patient realizes or recognizes, understands there's some difficulties. Until that, healing will not start. So that is the same in here. Same in here. Okay, so we'll have a break for tea. Not very good news, sorry. Oh, yeah. We are discussing on the certain states of our mind, emotions and thoughts. When they occur, when they arise, individuals, mental states, and also certain extents behavior make the unhelpful, unhealthy, and the term that we use in our previous session, the classical Indian and in here the Buddhist masters, the term is used in Tibetan, Myunmong, and it is translated in English, affliction or delusion. As I mentioned earlier in the previous session, for us what is important is from these description, from these explanation, what is affliction, what is, afflicted mind, what is deluded mind, from these experienced, those great teachers, then try to understand whether they occur, whether they arise in our mental state, in our mental continuum or not. Through that, then we will understand, what is affliction, what is in Tibetan Myunmong. So before I continue to explain or to discuss with you some of the individual those afflictions that we started in the previous session, first say this from the Buddhist teachers' viewpoint. What is the main purpose? What is the main purpose of meditation? What is the main purpose? There can be many, many purposes, reasons, including these days very popular, the secular mindfulness meditations, awareness meditations, and so forth. But the classical, Buddhist texts, when they explain the purpose of meditation, and I think it is good to say a few words at this junction because we are discussing about the affliction. It is said like this. First, I will say in Tibetan, in case in the future some Tibetan may listen or watch this recording, Rang Semji Wang De Song, Sem Nimonbe Wang De Song. So Rang here refers to oneself, himself or herself. Rang Semji Wang De Song. Our lives, our activities, are very much under the, our thoughts, emotions, attitudes, and under the power. Or we are very much, individuals are very much, influenced, or if I use a little bit stronger term, under the thumb of the minds, emotions, and thoughts. Rang simply one song. Sen is the mind, or consciousness, cognition, whatever term that you use. Rang simply one song. Then the next phrase is Sem Myomobe want song. Sem here again refers to the mind, the consciousness, that our mind, consciousness, which dominates our life, but that mind and Sem, that consciousness, is under the thumb of the affliction. Under the thumb of the affliction. In other words, our entire, the mindset is very much dominated by the affliction. Don't think, we are all the time, 24 hours a day, with a strong attachment, strong anger, strong hatred. We are not saying that. When we say dominated, not in that fashion, not in that kind of very manifested fashion. So that is the first starting. Now the purpose of the meditation in a very classical Buddhist text, the classical of the meditation is to reverse those two stages. First, to reverse, that domination of the affliction of our mind should be reversed. When that happens, then we should reverse that mind which is dominating upon ourselves. Then we will become our own protector. Do you remember yesterday? One of those quotations I made, from the Dhammapada. Oneself is one's own refuge or protector. In Tibetan, Dhammi Gun. So the purpose of the meditation in the classical Buddhist text is for that. To disentangle the affliction from our mental continuum, and also to disentangle ourselves from the mental state. We have the say, we have the power to say what kind of mindset that we should have. Our mind should have the power to what kind of mental state that's going to experience. Affliction or other side. And that is counts as a purpose of meditation. So, think about that. So then another affliction that we that we experience in our everyday lives or regularly, at least in a subconscious level, is in Tibetan first is nga jiao. Nga jiao. It has a very nice, or I don't know, these two syllables make it very interesting. If you look at nga refers to oneself. Nga. Jiao means victory. Nga jiao. Yes. Victory of oneself. That refers to, I'm using this English term, negative pride. I'm attaching this negative here because in the English term, pride has a sometimes positive connotation, saying I'm very proud of my children, what they have done. I'm very proud of what I have achieved. So pride has some positive connotation, culturally at least. Linguistically, you use that as a positive. But in the Tibetan culture, language, Madhyal is always negative. There's no time, of when you use that term Madhyal. You say, I'm very Madhyal with what I have achieved. People say, whoops. Never. Immediately that term Madhyal, when you use that term in Tibetan Madhyal, it gives it, unhealthy comment. Some, one of this group of Tibetan teachers, around late 10th, started by this great Indian master that we briefly touched yesterday, Atisha. Atisha, there's a nice statue there, who came from India to Tibet. And from his teachings, there's this nice tradition is developed called Kadamba tradition. Kadamba tradition. One of his main disciples was a lay practitioner. It is also a statue there. It's called, the Domdapa, wearing a little bit strange blue, all the other statues you can see wearing a blue, top. So anyway, the point of what I'm making is a group of these teachers, later then move into dissolve or merge into other traditions. But in the early stage, it is called Kadamba tradition. They have a great reputation of training the mind. And this particular, although what it says, the teachings of the Buddha, starting from the Four Noble Truths, entire teachings of the Buddha are the training the mind. There isn't a single teaching given by the historical Buddha not training the mind. But this specific terminology, the training the mind, in Tibetan lojong, or sometimes called mind training, that started, by this group of teachers. Started with Atisha giving teachings, and then, mainly based on, do you remember, the last few days I've been quoting very often this great Indian master, Shantideva, in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. That text, some of Nagarjuna's texts, other texts, based on those texts. This group of teacher, Kadamba teacher, they developed this particular, use this particular term, mind training, Lojong, and adapt, have written many nice in the sense, extremely strict. There's no, what you call it, wishy-washy, or there's no gentle here and there. Boom, that's it. Mistake is here, solution is here. And some of their statements are very, very, sharp. And this is what I'm coming. One of the statements related to the negative pride in Tibetan, it says this: Ngajal ki kumbulu, yunden ki chuo micha. Ngajal is the negative pride. Kumbu, it's already having this image of, boom. That what you call the, in English, sometimes term is used, popped up. Did you say? Yeah. So Kumbu has that kind of connotation, that kind of, shape of round. Nothing can sit on that, Kumbu. Like if you have a lump of rock, very sharp like this, nothing can put on that rock. All sips or in different direction. So, the negative pride is, presented in that fashion. Ngaji kumbula. Yuanden di chuo micha. Yuanden is the good qualities. The water of good qualities will never sit on the top of that negative pride. It's beautiful sort of analogies. So here, this mental attitude, Ngajel, or sometimes in English the term is used arrogant, but upon the Tibetan term negative pride, the Ngajel is more touching more depth of this mindset than the arrogance. Arrogance is, anyway, I don't know that. This is a different language, not my first language. Anyway. The first thing here, once we have this either very actively or in the subconscious, negative pride is present, there is a tendency, there is a sense, I'm better than these people. First. When you say, they're a little bit better than me, then there's this sense of, Tibetan type of jealousy. The first thing, the Ngajel, negative pride has this, I'm better than them. But when you realize some are much better than you, then what you have? Jealousy. They're difficult to bear, difficult to digest, their good, better qualities, whatever that might be. Difficult to accept their good qualities, whatever is better than you can see, better than yourself. Very, very, negative pride is very painful the mental states. Yes, hatred is painful. Yes, attachment is very painful. But for me, this is very, very painful. Negative pride. When you see a little bit better, difficult to accept that, difficult to, this jealousy occurs. And when you see quite similar, in many ways, whatever you are, as the sort of saying, then you have this attitude, I want to better than that. Then you work, like not they all left. I have many nieces and nephews, many. And some of my nieces, are quite similar. Different my brothers and sisters, the children, they have quite similar age, have lots of competition. In that case, nephews are a little bit better. But on other side, the nephews are much worse. But anyway, painful. I'm better than that. She got that. I'm better than that. Color-wise, whatever. So when we see the equal, then we have this competition. What better? Then even the worst is when we see in certain extent, they are a little bit, whatever, financially, with the education, living, whatever, they are a little bit poorer than oneself, then start to ignore, that looking down. So this mental attitude is very, very painful attitude, negative pride. First of all, you have this, I'm good, I'm better. In that way, you don't want to learn from others. That's why this Tibetan expression I use. In that popped out attitude, you will not learn from others. So not yet. Then, under certain situations, when somebody praises you, you are in a very high state. When somebody scolds you or somebody sort of criticizes you, very, very unbearable, painful. So these are directly out of the negative pride. So think about really good thing to reflect on, to examine, to observe, to observe what observe or to watch. But so far we have discussed 3 afflictions. They all are not very helpful for us. And they all have this, a distorted element. Exaggeration, denial, all those elements are there. Mm-hmm.
Understand when you say exaggeration, what refers from these when someone is in denial, it means it's on the surface, they don't believe that they have such afflictions. Can you give a concrete example?
For example, the mental affliction that we are talking about, negative pride. Due to those, when individual perceives some are a little bit poorer than himself or herself, maybe that might be the case in terms of the obvious ones, but not necessarily in other case. They might be much better than himself or herself. That is denial. Taken, for example, as I mentioned the other day, for us, for me, the example is the place where I'm staying in South India. We have 2 dogs. These 2 dogs are much, much better to hear the noise than mine. So the human beings that with the negative pride that we see, that we perceive as a little bit poorer than us, therefore neglecting. Why? We think, oh, they're poorer than me because this and this. But they might be much better than in other areas than us. That's a neglecting the qualities what they have. And also, if we look at a little bit more depth in the Buddhist, teachings viewpoint, we all have the same potential. We all have the same potential. Here, I'm going to use the Buddhist jargon to become Buddha. So you can't ignore that, And we are denying that nature, that kind of qualities. So, the traditional or the classical term, there are 2 terms. I'm using this very colloquial, the exaggeration and the, denial. But the classical Buddhist terms are this, the Tathata, the Cheta, 2 extreme views. 2 extreme views. The extreme view of, nihilism, and the extreme view of eternalism. Those are the 2 terms. But these terms may not make that much sense immediately. So therefore, I'm using those colloquial terms. Exaggeration is the extreme view of...
For myself, so exaggeration would be just over-explaining or just focusing on the negative aspects or qualities of others, and denial is just completely overlooking the positive qualities or the potential nature of others.
Yeah, these are the clear or the examples come into my head. But in this in many different areas that we can look at. For example, in terms of the hatred, hatred that when that occurs within our mental continuum, mainly, as I mentioned earlier, thinking whom that we feel hatred, either individual or the group, we are thinking they are very terrible. They are something did us or going to do it or have done in our great grandfathers or our possessions great damage. There might be element of that. There might be element of that. And they may have caused. But in that damage they cause, pain they cause, if we look at a little bit detail, our perception of, in that relation to that, I am sure there's exaggeration. And same as the attachment to the things, attached to certain things, quality, value, usefulness, and all those things. I'll use my example. I have in my bag. Now it's become inseparable from me. I'm sure you all know what I mean. That's my mobile. Inseparable. So I have this, I can't remember, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I went back to UK, and my previous, the mobile was not good enough. So I bought a new one, thinking about, this will do good. So there's this, yes, it has a lots of potentials, but I'm using only to receive calls and to use WhatsApp. That's it. But it is more. But when I'm getting it, it is Apple 13 or 14 or something, or much better than the 8 what I had. So yes, it has a great potential, but I have lots of added on. But in reality, I do only very few things. Occasionally, I do the email, but that's not good for my side. And so, attachment, I say, exaggeration on the good qualities, values, usefulness, whatever. So there's always exaggeration. That is in classical Buddhist terms, extreme of eternalism. Eternal, this is quite nice term in Tibetan. In Tibetan, tattva, tattva. There's an element of permanence. But permanence, don't look at it as a permanence or impermanence. What is it's talking about exaggeration. Yeah. So point what I want to continue here before we have a break for question and answer. So these 3 root affliction that I mentioned already, the meaning of the root. These 3 root afflictions so far we discussed. Now, if we closely examine, they're all connected with the sense of I. I. Occasionally mind, that is the branch. But the root is I, sense of I. This another great Indian master, I think around the 5th or 6th century, Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti. Yesterday, with that our coach master called Dhammakirti, but this one is called Chandrakirti, and have written several beautiful philosophical treatises. And one out of those, one is not as a commentary, but the related to Nagarjuna and Nagarjuna's, one of the great disciples, the Buddhapalita. He is writing a text through his understanding of Nagarjuna and the Buddhapalita's notion of emptiness, notion of shunyata. And that text is called, the Madhyamika Avatara. And quite often translated, the title is translated in English saying, entering into the middle way. Entering into the middle way. In Tibetan, Umala Juba. Entering into the middle way, or middle path, middle way. And in the first chapter, there are two lines, which is directly relevant to here, which we are just discussing. 당보 ngāshi dāla shengyurji, dāgi dishe ngā chakki. So 당보 here it means initially or at the first, 당보 ngāshi, ngā means I or the self, ngāshi that means sense of I, sense of self, 당보 ngāshi, dāla shengyurji, grasp on self. 당보 ngāshi dāla shengyurji. Dāgi dishe ngā chakki. Then that follows, that grasping follows, my body, my feelings, my thoughts, my mobile phone, better than yours. Not mine. So there's this. Sometimes these two are too fast. I and the mind almost come together. But there is a sequence in general. So these two lines very nicely, stated in terms of the sequence. Sequential is done first. I, sense of I, with this sense of I's grasping of I, and the grasping of I leads to my body, my possession, my status, so on and so forth. So all these three afflictions so far we discussed. Hatred, attachment, and the negative pride. They're all one way or another, directly or indirectly. Source is from self-grasping, if I use the Buddhist term. When the sense of I arises, for us, there's no time not to have a grasping with it. If it is just sense of I, that's fine, very innocent. But sense of I follows with strong grasp. In Tibetan, it is called Dat Zin. Dat is self, Zin is grasping. And quite often in English translated saying self-grasping. So think about that. Think about, what you call the analyze, probe. These are the things which is very, very useful. Do you remember the other day when we are talking about meditation? The manner of meditations in general, there are two. Placement meditation, simply placing one's own mind on the object of the meditation, whatever you are meditating on. The other one is analytical meditation. And that's what here you mean, analytical meditation. And in here, this quite often used in English circle, critical analysis. That's what it is. Critical analysis. Critical in the sense, very honest analysis. Not critical in the sense all the time criticizing, honest analysis, depth analysis. And of course, to really to convince ourselves, attachment is not very helpful. Negative pride is not very helpful. Long-lasting analysis is important. To really to convince. Without long-lasting analysis, few occasions here and there will not give us that kind of conviction. Do you remember the other day I used the term, that expression? Even Buddha sits in front of you. Buddha says, that's not right. But you need to say, no, it is right. That sort of conviction is needed. And that kind of conviction will come for long-term analysis. Analyze. Find the, out of the analysis, you find certain understanding, then you analyze further, then you will find that really this unmovable conviction. That's what we need. So this self-grasping, and here, because we have already touched on when the grasping, that grasping is directly related to the self, to the I. That's the one sort of that term that we use, self-grasping. If that grasping is related to my body, my status, my possessions, that is also not very healthy grasping. I'm going to use these two terms. This is not, I'm not going to explore any further, but for your long-term benefits. People who want to pursue on this subject a little bit further, I'm going to throw two terms just here because we are already here. So in Tibetan, it says this. First, I will say the Tibetan terms. Kansaki Tangzin, that's the first one. Second one is called Shuiki Tangzin. Kansaki Tangzin, Shuiki Tangzin. Self-grasping of the person and self-grasping of the phenomena. Kansaki Tangzin, it is referring to self-grasping related to the individual, himself or herself. That is called self-grasping of the person, Kansaki Tangzin. And self-grasping of the phenomena, it refers to self-grasping related to the body, feeling, to the possession, and can be extended all the way up to what in Tibetan we used to say, end of the oceans. All are one way or another related to the I. My country, my blah blah, my blah blah, and eventually my world. So these two graspings, both are, if when you write down Mahaprabhu in English, in that terms you may find both self-grasping of the person and self-grasping of the phenomena. Both are called self-grasping. But one is focused on the I or the self, one is focused on the other than the self, other than the individual, body, feeling, so and so. So that is here from the Buddha, to all the way, to up to the present time. Those great Buddhist teachers have said That is the most troublemaker. Self-grasping of the person and the self-grasping of the phenomena. Those two are the most troublemaker. The term is used, Buddhist jargon, root of the samsara. Root of the samsara. And very often, general term is used, ignorance. Ignorance. Here, ignorance is not referring to just simply not knowing. If ignorant is that in the Buddhist the teachings saying ignorance is root of the samsara or root of the problem, if that ignorance is just simply not knowing, then not very serious. Not very serious. Here, the root of the samsara, root of the problem, refers in the Buddhist circle, refers to ignorance. Here, ignorance refers to actively misinterpreting. Actively misinterpreting. That's important. In this case, actively misinterpreting self and actively misinterpreting other than the self, the body, all the possessions. And these are the called self-grasping of the person and self-grasping of the phenomena. So now the question is how? How actively misinterpret? These days, people talk a lot about social media, misinterpret. And there are other terms. What are the other terms? Relation to that misinterpret in the social media? Manipulation. There are some other things. Sorry?
Fake news.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, sorry?
Fake news.
Fake news. Those are the ones. Good ones. There's another one, which I can't remember exactly the English term.
WhatsApp University.
Sorry?
WhatsApp University.
WhatsApp University, did you say? Okay. Yeah. So in other words, there's exactly the English word, close to the misinterpretation, distortion. There's another one. There's another also disinformation. That's what I want. Wrong interpretation or misinterpretation or so those are the things. So now here we are talking about a particular states of mind, how that mind misinterpret I or self. Okay. So we'll have a 15 minutes tea break. I'll come back that after lunch. How we interpret. First have a question and answer. Have a question?
I'm getting a bit confused on the terminology. I think in the past we've talked about 3 poisons, and now we're talking about the 6 root infections, and I feel from what I remember.
Can you say past what did you say? 3 poisons, you say?
3 poisons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that also includes these. So
Yeah.
am I getting confused between the context on how we use the terminology 3 poisons versus 6 mental afflictions, or are they all the same?
What do you think? What kind of impression have you got?
I think there's a lot of overlaps that we give mentions, like, people talking about aversion, but then they also included anger, because that's how you identify it. But at the moment, I've heard too many things and it's not getting structured in a way.
So you have too many things. It is not my fault.
Okay.
It is your fault. We have 7 days to talk. So, no, you are in the right spot.
Okay.
The 3 poisons that I used earlier, or the other day, it's exactly what I'm talking here now.
Okay.
In the 3 poisons the other day I used, just the term I throw on you to say 3 poisons. I want to draw your attention. Because as soon as you poison, there's alarm. So I want to, what's that? Those poisons. I'm sure not what's called that egg poisons. Some what's called when people eat some old eggs or similar. Yeah. So this is very standard Buddhist term to use poisons to refer to those 3 afflictions. Today we are going individually. One is hatred, one is attachment, and one is just we are starting ignorance. Those are the 3 poisons.
But that's 6.
Oh yeah.
And then there are secondary.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk all. You already complained. You said you said you have heard too much. No, I'm teasing you. Sorry. Okay? Yeah, you're right spot. That's right. I'm talking about those afflictions. Okay?
Okay, I have a question, like I think too many things we talk about, especially in terms of logic and psychological understanding of these issues. It feels like I'm stepping my toe into this world and might take a lifetime to understand everything. For now, like to start on the path, if I do not understand logic and the psychological aspect of Buddhism, what do you recommend to start with, and how important it is to understand all this? But until I understand, what do I?
Okay. I want to answer that question, making a quoting from one of the Tibetan teachers, the verse. Sete yun tong sheje ne mangxing. Ce chesam bi shebe. Ngangbe chula oma lembashin. Rangi deba tangdo lang cha. So, Sete yun tong. This lifespan is not that long. Sete yun tong. Sheje ne mangxing. There are so many things to be learned. That's what you're saying now. Sheje ne mangxing. Not only the lifespan is short, but also we really don't know how short that would be. Therefore, this third line is a little bit strange for the Tibetan to say, but anyway, it's nice. Maybe come from Indian, reading many Indian texts, or even that's a fact or not, I don't know. And that's the analogies. Analogy is Ngangbe chula oma limachin. Ngangba here refers to this bird duckling, those small ducks, babies. I don't know whether it's true or not. When these small ducks are fed, mixed with the water and milk, they will just sip the water. They sip the milk. They just leave the water behind. It is true? No? How do you know that?
I've never seen ducks.
So that is the analogy. Anyway, that's the analogy. So it says that. So as if small ducklings separate milk from the water and take the milk. So there are so many things to be learned, but which really suits, which really benefits to your mind, take that. As if the ducklings take the milk from the water, leave the water behind. So there are so many things to be learned. So I think that is really nice, beautiful, statements by this Tibetan great teacher. He had written many nice, like advice, advice statements, like a social advice statements, not necessarily religious advice. So that, your question is, there are so many things to be learned, even just the last, what the discussion that we had in last 6 days. But, as if you remember, the first day, I raised this question, and we settled down on the answer. What is the purpose of learning the nature of the mind? That is our main topic, although I have said so many things, but that is our main topic. And I said, we must raise this question to ourselves. What is the purpose of learning the nature of the mind? Do you remember? Have you got that? Did you answer to that question? No? Oh, too late now. So in the text, beginning of the text, it says to tame the mind. To tame the mind. Semdulva. Semdulva. To tame the mind. That wild mind that we are talking about. Attachment, aversion, and all those, afflictions. That mind need to be tamed to benefit ourselves. So just, bring certain things along these. 6 days, blah, blah, is not too much. Buddha, blah, blah, 40-something years. What you going to do with that now? In the Tibetan canon, in the Buddhist canon, there are 108 volumes. So far, what we discuss is, I think, less than a few pages. And on top of that, for the Tibetans, there are 230-something volumes of Shastras, the commentaries written by mainly Indian masters. But don't overwhelm by that. Just take a few things. That really helps to make your daily life, at the end of the day, before you're going to bed, look back, what I've done, at least not have a regret. Need to learn to live that kind of life. If it is possible, not too bad. I've done quite well. According to the morning motivation, intention, what I've said, I didn't contradict that much. I didn't go against that much to the the motivation that I've said. That kind of life is needed. Whether we become scholar or not that important. Of course, it is helpful to learn, but sometimes scholars are mad. With their knowledge, it becomes mad. So not necessarily to become very scholar. It's good if you're a scholar, but the main thing is to tame the mind. Yeah? Okay. One question?
just when you hear the teachings, much of it,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can hear.
much of the method is like today's teaching is
Yeah.
when we hear the teachings over time, much of the method like today is skillful method to take you out the loving kindness, the compassion, and so forth. Because we are mostly lost in getting attached to the self, and that's a mistake because there is no I, there is no self.
Mm.
Is that one way to look at it?
Mm.
It's a mistaken, like in English they say you're walking up the wrong tree.
Mm. Mm.
It's a mistake. Is that one way to look at it?
Mm. If I got it your question very correctly, it seems you are saying we have lots of discussions on the cultivation of love, compassion, and all those things on the one hand, and also looking at these afflictions. But there are teachings, or there are these teachings to look at the nature of I or the self. Is that wrong, or is that your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Is the understanding that the methods of compassion, loving kindness is mostly outwards.
Outwards. Okay.
Other
Oh.
than I,
Okay. Now, yeah.
because
Mm. Mm.
the attachment to this I
Mm.
is in the end it's empty.
Mm.
It's the other way to
Okay.
understand.
Mm. Okay. We are going to have a little bit a discussion in the afternoon. To this we just touched on how our self-grasping of the person and self-grasping of the phenomena, how they grasp or how they apprehend mistakenly the self or the minds or the bodies and so forth. We will discuss that this afternoon a little bit. Now when we meditate on loving kindness, great compassion, you're right. In these two kinds of meditation, the object of the meditation, if I use that term, it is the other living beings, other sentient beings. That is the focus. But as a meditator, it is oneself. You are the meditator. So there is a strong sense of I am meditating on loving kindness, great compassion. So in that sense, sometimes quite good to have a observation, to have a critical analysis that I, who is a meditator, looks like, or how we apprehend, how we grasp that I meditate on loving kindness. I take refuge in three jewels, that I. But if I try to answer directly to your question, if I got it correctly, you are right. The meditation on loving kindness is very much outside. Outside in the sense, focus is others, other beings. but it is not completely outward going. It is also there's inward in the sense I am meditating. If you are fully alert in the process of meditation or loving kindness, there's also a strong sense of looking inside to ourselves. I don't know if this is my answer, but whether I answer your question or not, I don't know. But anyway, we'll leave it here now. Have a delicious lunch. Okay? I or my lunch. Okay?